Hey friends, today's episode is brought to you by Engagio, the leader in account-based marketing and sales with their all-in-one solution. Are you familiar with account-based marketing and sales? I mean, if you're selling to the enterprise, to big business, account-based strategies are the new wave of doing business. If you're selling to the enterprise, if you're dealing with multiple decision makers, if you need to close larger deals, then an account-based approach is a necessity. However, while there's a lot of talk out there about account-based marketing and sales, there's very little actionable advice on strategies and tactics you need to take. So our friends at Engagio asked dozens of independent sales and marketing experts, leaders in their fields, to contribute their recommendations about what you need to know to get started with it. And Engagio has compiled the collective wisdom of these experts into a most comprehensive guide that reveals everything you need to know about using account-based strategies to win bigger deals. It's called The Clear and Complete Guide to Account-Based Sales Development. It's free, and you need it. So head over to engagio.com/accelerate and grab your copy today. That's engagio.com/accelerate. Okay, let's do the show. It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 495 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record, where I hold in-depth conversations with today's leading experts in sales, marketing, and leadership 6 days a week. Joining me on the show for the second time is my friend Tim Wackel. He's a top sales trainer, a leading expert on making better sales presentations. You can learn more about Tim at timwackel.com. And I asked Tim to come on the show to talk about this problem that many sellers have, which is how to stop pitching when you first meet with a prospect and how to start solving their problems. And we're going to ask Tim about how to ask better questions to uncover the buyer's real needs and real goals and objectives in making a change. Tim Wackel, welcome back to Accelerate.
Hey, Andy, thanks for having me.
Well, my pleasure. Always a pleasure. We don't get to talk enough.
No, we don't. We really got to get better at this.
and find some place to meet, halfway in between.
It's been a long time, my friend.
It has been a long time. So first question, just to kick things off here, in your estimation, your opinion right now, today, what's the single biggest challenge facing sales reps?
Oh, wow, Randy. Andy, that's a great question. You always deliver a fast pitch. I think the single biggest challenge, if I look at the reps I've been watching and monitoring and talking to, is I think a lot of reps today, Andy, are moving way too fast and they really don't know what they're doing. So it's kind of the, you know what, I'm lost, but I'm making really good time. And, and my heart goes out to them because.
Well, too fast in what direction? I mean, not what direction, but I mean, in what areas are they moving too quickly?
Too much activity, not enough accomplishment. So at the end of the day, and sometimes this is driven from the top, it's tone of the top,
sure.
But I'm being measured by how many connects, how many dials, how many proposals, how many face-to-face meetings. And it's like, wow, that's great from an activity standpoint, but I'm not seeing anything come out of the bottom of the pipeline, number one. And number two, you're going home at the end of the day and you're exhausted, but you really don't feel like you've accomplished anything.
Which is not sustainable.
Yeah, that's just, so, well, I'm a big fan of, hey, look, let's just tap the brakes. Sometimes we got to slow down to get more done, and let's have a plan. Let's know how, let's work. It's the fundamentals. And Andy, that's my heart. I've always been a fundamental guy. So it's like, hey,
sure,
listen,
me too.
What's your story? What's your go-to-market strategy? What's your plan for follow-up? What's your cadence? What's your methodologies? What's your mediums? How do you engage? How do you propose? I mean, and some guys get tired of hearing it, but the people that really have mastered the basics, I think, have mastered a lot, and that's still the model I aspire to.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I just gave a webinar on that. I probably even go a step lower on the basics. Just what happens when two people talk, right? That's if your sales process isn't set up in support of making that moment when a sales rep talks to a customer, that first human-to-human interaction or any human-to-human interaction in their buying process, if your process isn't set up to make that as value-laden and as impactful an interaction as possible, then your process is out of whack.
Well, your process is out of whack, and maybe you don't have the skills to support the right process. It's the art of the dialogue, art of the conversation.
But we seem to be so metric-driven. Which I think is what you're talking about.
Yeah, it, it is. I don't know.
I mean, a lot of that, to me, I see that driven by coming from the top. We've seen certain people, people written, Mike Weinberg and others have written a book about sales management that, have addressed this and been hugely popular. Is that, that the tone is really set by CEOs and senior management that more. And to your point, is not really digging down into it and say, okay, well, how can we do less but achieve more?
Yeah. Well, and I think Weinberg, I love Mike's stuff. He just makes me laugh when I read his stuff because I think he's taking a lot of people to task that maybe should be taken to task. I think there's just this fear of, I really don't know what's going on in my organization, so I just want people to do more. And I figure if we do more, we'll get more. And again, that's not I think there's a metric, and the metric is how much business are you producing? And all those other things, I don't think are necessarily very good indicators.
Yeah, I was giving a talk recently and told sales reps that basically, one of the issues that they have is that they're not putting their own stamp on their selling, right? They're not playing to their strengths. And as a result, we've got these people that are sort of marching in conformity, right? Those directives coming to the top. We need this many dials, these many conversations, blah, 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 blah. The consequence is that I said, we've got these robots basically in sales. Yeah. As you said, they go home every day exhausted, both physically and mentally, because they didn't accomplish what they wanted to accomplish. And to me, a big part of the problem is that we don't let people loose anymore, right? If you look at the people at the top, they're doing their thing, right? You look at the top performers, they're not queuing to the process 100% of the time, right? They've developed their own way of doing things. And I think what keeps sort of the people that aren't the top performers back is they don't have that confidence to go try their own thing.
Yeah. Yeah. They look across the fence and they see the stallions running wild, but they're afraid to try. And,
right.
I think you're spot on that. You got to put your stamp on it. You've got to be unique. Otherwise you're going to get lost in the noise.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the noise internally in your own company, right? Because you're not going to get the confidence of your managers. And so, the pressure is going to be on you to conform, right?
Yeah.
Hit the metrics and so on, but turn the metrics on its head. When I gave this presentation, I said, so finish the story is, I got a question at the end of it. It's like, so you're telling me I shouldn't do what my manager says? and sometimes, don't. I mean, you got to find what's going to work for you. And if you're just, like I said, following that rigid process, you're never going to determine what that is.
Right. Well, it points to an engagement last month. We're talking about, the art of follow-up. What does effective follow-up look like? How do you know when you're being persistent, not becoming a pest? Mm-hmm. And long story short, we're doing a deep dive with one rep in particular who takes great pride in following, the CRM manifesto on this is how we're following up. And the rep had made 5-6 different attempts to reach this prospect who had gone dark. And so the question to the rep, Andy, was, gee, what do you think's going on here? And the rep turned to me and says, I'll be honest with you, Tim. He says, I just don't think this prospect is interested anymore. And I looked at what his follow-up plan looked like. I looked at what he was doing, and I said, son, I'm not sure if the prospect's not interested, but I'm pretty convinced you're not interesting. and that's kind of hard. That's tough love.
Sure.
But, if I called you every Thursday for 6 weeks and left you a message, Andy, saying, hey, it's Tim, I'm just checking in, I don't know that you'd be real motivated to pick up the phone and call me back. So we've got to
absolutely not.
We've got to put our spin on it.
Well, yeah. Well, and that is part of what we're just talking about is what are you doing that's worth the customer's time? Because if people stop talking to you, they made that decision. You're just, as you said, for whatever reason, whether they're uninterested or they find you uninteresting.
Yeah.
They've made this calculation and this mathematical calculation. Yeah, I don't get any return on this investment of my time talking to you.
Well, but they should. Early on, one of the first sales managers I had, trapped me because it was like, do your customers consider you to be valuable? I said, oh, of course they do. And his follow-up question was, would they be willing to pay for a sales call? And that was like, ruh-roh. That's a real Good question.
That's a trap question.
Well, it is, but it really makes reflect that when you show up, if you're showing up and pitching your wares and trying to earn a commission, I doubt anybody's going to pay for that. But if you show up and you've got expertise and you've done your homework and you understand the space and you know what's going on competitively, you know what's going on in the marketplace, you can engage and share those insights through insights and questions. Yeah, that's somebody I want to spend some time around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was laughing when you were saying that because they actually had one company I was at where I actually had this group of customers that paid me to write proposals to them.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was interesting. It was only a small number of customers that we could get away with it on, but anyway,
Sweet.
Yeah, that'd be nice if everybody did. But I really think that's sort of the ideal that many people talk about in terms of how sales is going to evolve is on the sort of transactional end of the business. We see more automation and AI and machine learning sort of creeping in. It's not going to supplant people, but it's going to change the nature of that job. But on the higher end, the more complex sales in the B2B world, you should reach the point, if you want to survive, where your customers do look at you as a consultant or as a trusted advisor, and they would pay for you to come and do a sales call.
Well, I subscribe to that because if they totally understood their problem and if they totally understood your solution, then they really don't need you. And part of the reason they humor us is because they can't fully articulate their problem. They don't fully understand the possible solutions. They're not quite confident on what the implementation is going to look like. And that's what I think that's what they're dying to hear from us. And the reps that can go out and consult on that level, I think are incredibly successful. I know they are. There's no thing to it. They are.
Sure. Well, I think one of the keys that they have is that they're able to help the customer understand where they want to go. To your point, I know the customers don't know the answers to all that. They think they know. But part of your job is you're got to help them come to a better understanding of where they want to go, what they want to become, what they want to be. And if you haven't mastered the product and service and invested in your own development, you're not going to get to that point.
Well, it's like several years ago, I was looking for a new website, right? And everybody wanted to try to sell me a website. And then I finally bumped into somebody that said, well, you really don't want a website, do you? I mean, that's not really what you're after. What are you really after? I was like, well, I'd really like more leads. Okay, well, then how do we go about getting more leads? And so instead of trying to sell me a website, it was like, well, maybe you need a website, but maybe you also need a social media plan. Maybe you need to be doing a PPC campaign, right? And so it's the old nobody wants the drill. Everybody's looking for a hole. So quit trying to sell the drill and understand that ultimately I just need a hole, and whatever it's going to take, that's what I want to get.
So, sort of, going a different direction a little bit on the conversation is we're talking about communicating and trusted advisors and so on. You work with a lot of people on presentation skills. So how does that factor into credibility building, trust building, and so on? I mean, you look at a lot of sales processes, that trust factor really has to exist before you even get the opportunity to go in and really present.
Well, so I look at it. My experience, Andy, is the presentation typically happens at two prominent times in the selling process. It'll either happen real early. Like there's some industries, some markets where it's like they'll invite you in and they just want you to pitch. And if you're successful, you get invited and you've got a seat at the table. And if you're not successful, then you don't even get a chance. And then I see a lot of presentations happening then at the end of the selling process, where you've done all your due diligence, you've done all your discovery, and now you're kind of doing your firm and final. And in both those situations, right, if you're not good at presenting, you're either A, not going to get a seat at the table, or B, you're going to invest a lot of time, energy, and effort. And then at the end of the selling process, you're not going to be able to punch it across the goal line. And it continues today, Andy, to be well, here's what I'll tell you is everybody's like, oh, our presentations are so unique. They're so different. We're very, very different. And you're not. You're not. I don't even have to look at your deck, and I can tell you right now that your deck is not different than every other deck I'm seeing, because there's a lot of similarities in what reps are doing today. And to me, it's just low-hanging fruit. It really is.
Well, what do you mean low-hanging fruit?
That so many presentations today are so bad that if you would take a little time, energy, and effort to really work on what does it take to put together an effective and deliver an effective presentation, you could be a rock star. I think you could sell ice to Eskimos because everybody else is just beating the same old drum and it just doesn't work.
All right. So let's talk first about what everybody's doing that's the same. Then let's go to what you should be doing that'll be different.
Well, I think the thing, so I see a lot of mistakes. One of the most common mistakes, like the mistake number one I see a lot of, Andy, is just not really understanding the audience. And what I mean by not understanding your audience is that, I get involved and it's like, okay, so tell me about this presentation, tell me about your audience. And if I hear things like name, rank, serial number, email address, and where they fit on the org chart, it's like, look, Sparky, that's really insightful, but you're not ready to present. Because you really don't understand the who, the how, the what, the where, the when, and the why. And so, a lot of presentations, as you know, Andy, are kind of all over the place. It's a little bit of that, a little bit of that, and a little bit of this other thing. And the reason they're all over the place is because you haven't really truly defined what the opportunity is. You haven't really truly defined what the customer's looking for. I mean, the best presentations, this is very simplistic, but the best presentation is you get done delivering it, and the customer goes, wow, that's exactly what I'm looking for. And that little voice inside your head goes, yeah, I know, because I spent some time figuring this out, and I knew that's exactly what you wanted, and that's why I presented it to you. So we eliminate this mind reading, and it's like, look, I got to do my due diligence. I want to make sure I'm sharing ideas that are insightful, impactful, and on target. And I ain't going to do that until you've given me the access to the information I need to have.
Yeah, I was going to say that I always find the best presentations are the ones that you actually don't give.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, for me, when I look back on, real major presentations that we had to prepare, whether it was, to a customer or whether it was to an investor, is the best meetings are always those where the laptop stayed closed.
Yep.
You're prepared, but you engaged in conversation and covered the same material, but I've all done as a conversation and through questioning. And yeah, everybody walks away and thinks, hey, that's one of the best meetings we've had.
Yeah, exactly. But because you understand what's going on and you're telling a story. You're kind of, the whole thing when making a presentation, I'm often telling reps, look, let's design this in analog and deliver it in digital. And way too often, reps get strapped into trying to design it in digital, right? So the first PowerPoint slide, they type the word welcome, and they're like, okay, I'm really rocking now. This is going to be good. And the last slide, you know what the last slide says? Thank you. And it's like, whoa, we get some bookends here, brother. Let me tell you, they've never seen this before. Keep going, son.
Yeah, I finished slide 100 and slide 1. So now there's only 98 to fill in between.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah. Well, so we talked, I understand the problem. And I think one is also, in addition to just content, is just presentation style, presentation capability, if you will. That's a problem I see all the time. Is people don't practice enough. And what they do is they leave their practice until they actually have a presentation instead of having something they should be practicing all the time.
Right.
I mean, and we do this as public speakers, right? We have sort of our set speeches that we carry around in us and we'll modify and tweak them, but give us 20 minutes and we can probably give them, whether we have a slide deck or not. The problem with the reps is they become handicapped and reliant on the slide deck.
Right.
And if you ask them to talk without it, impossible.
Yeah, and that shouldn't be the case.
I mean, it's practice, right? It's this commitment. And you just don't see it unless it's, like I said, it's something that's coming together. So when people do have a presentation, they've got to practice. I mean, what do you recommend as sort of the best practices for them in terms of recording it, giving it to their peers, how many times they should rehearse it? I remember there used to be rules of thumb about how much time you should spend in developing a presentation compared to the length of the presentation.
My advice, Andy, has always been, and you hit the word, it's to rehearse. Oftentimes reps think that, forget reps. I mean, I'll speak in first person. Early on in my sales career, I'd be seat 21D on an American Airlines flight, and I got my laptop open, and I'm going through the deck. Mm-hmm. And that little voice inside my head, he is brilliant. It's like, oh, they're going to laugh at this. Oh, they're going to go wow at this. They're going to cry when I say that. So that little voice inside your head is usually a pretty doggone good presenter. The challenge is nobody else can hear that little voice inside your head. So there's a big difference between kind of, practicing in your mind and kind of thinking about it and actually physically rehearsing. So if it's a tabletop presentation, you rehearse in a tabletop environment. If it's a stand-up presentation in a boardroom setting, you try to get as close to the real deal as possible. If it's going to be, a group setting with 25, you want to try to rehearse in an environment that is going to be as similar as possible to the environment you're in. And that seems so fundamental, so basic, but oftentimes, again, it goes back to what we talked about earlier. We're running around so fast that we don't even think about doing that. And then we get in front of the customer and we launch and it's like, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. I'm not even confident what's on the next slide.
Well, so I'll give you a couple examples. One is when you're going in to talk to let's say it's a big pitch to a stand-up pitch to a corporation, but you're going to be in a boardroom. Have them send you a picture of what the boardroom looks like. And where you're going to be standing. And this is not crazy at all because, I had an experience once where I knew I was going to be in a boardroom, telling the story on myself. I knew I was going to be in a boardroom. What I didn't understand was the boardroom was really skinny. And so basically they had room on each side to slide into their chairs and slip their legs under the table, but you couldn't walk around behind the chairs on either side. And I had rehearsed in a boardroom where there was plenty of room to wander around. And there was no room in front of the slides. And so it was, it was not my best moment because I was trapped. I rehearsed a certain way. The movement was, I thought was, part of it. And, little things like that can make a huge difference. So if you're, one tip I'd say is, you're presenting in a boardroom or any setting that you're presenting in, have them send you a photo of it. Somebody walking with their phone, your point of contact, take a couple pictures and send them to you.
Well, it's an area that all of us can improve in.
Well, and I think, but the rehearsal thing is critical. I love that you brought it up because for me, again, as people think these things through in their head, is you have to give a presentation. I think at least twice before you give it, and actually rehearse it start to finish with people watching in a similar setting as you talked about, because especially if you have a slide deck, the transitions between slide to slide. Really important. You're going to understand whether you have a story, a coherent narrative or not. Are you just reading what's on the slides or you actually have a story you're telling?
Well, and that's the other part of the equation, Andy. I mean, we spent some time talking about, the delivery, and the delivery is very, very important because we've all seen subject matter experts just fall flat because they couldn't deliver. But the other opportunity is you got to make sure that there is a story. And again, back to what I'm seeing is, and I'll challenge people that are listening to this, look at your deck. And I'll bet you a dollar to your dime that within the first 12 slides of your deck, most of the attention is all about you. Let me tell you about who we are. Let me tell you about what we do. Oh, please. I want to show you this map of the U.S. with all the little red dots so you know where all our offices are.
Or all of our customers.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that information is not important. But way too often we lead with that, and it's not relevant. It's not part of it. It's the end. It shouldn't be the beginning of the story. It should be the end of the story. And that's a real challenge for a lot of reps. It gets back to they haven't really done their homework, and so they really don't understand the customer. So if I don't really understand the customer, then what I'm going to talk about is something I'm comfortable about, which is all about me. And that I think that's just a real quick way to disconnect and disengage. You're not going to win them over.
Yeah, what I recommend is you take the whole corporate capabilities section of your proposal or your presentation, your presentation, and delete it. Well, I mean, the fact is, if you're at the point of giving a presentation, they've researched you, right? The buyer's gone to your website. I mean, most of what you're going to say, they know already about your corporate capabilities and, the Applehood or apple pie and motherhood part of it. They know that already. So by my recommendation, I'd tell people, just cut this part out.
Yeah.
I mean, you can give it to them later if they're really interested. But they probably know that these days. I mean, it's not like, pre-internet days where, this is the only sole source of information about your corporation.
Yeah. So I'm in total agreement. I mean, when I look at a presentation and I'm real big on, hey, let's just focus on three things. Three's not a rule, but a rule of thumb. And And when I'm coaching, more often than not, yeah, I'm not saying this is the be all end all, but I really like to see what, how, why. That's how I like to see a presentation structured, as the what, how, why. And the what is always, what is the situation? What is the problem? What is the opportunity? What is before us? Because when we speak about what, we're speaking the customer's language. Hey guys, I'm here today because this is what we've discovered. This is what we've learned. This is what we think the opportunity is. This is what the risk is. So when we start with talking about the what, we're really demonstrating our expertise of really knowing the customer's environment and what they're up against.
Right.
The second part then is you transition into the how. And now that we're spot on with what the assessment is, let me tell you about how we go about making this better, or how we go about taking advantage of this opportunity, or how do we go about mitigating this risk. And the how is when they're like, wow, these guys get it, and these are some great ideas. And then the third and final part is that's when I want to see the why, is, well, why are you the right person to do this with? But my experience is, Andy, if you really tee up the what and the how, doing the why is typically not that hard of a sell. And kind of the little picture I always like to use is it's the old emergency room example, right? If you got ill tonight, you had a bad meal, and you got a little bit of food poisoning, and you got rushed to the emergency room, and that attending physician comes in, do you want him to start with the why? Which is how most decks start, right? Hey, let me tell you a little bit about this hospital. Let me tell you a little bit about the staff. Let me tell you about where I got my undergrad. Let me tell you about where I did my internship, right? You would be like, no, dude, the first thing I want to hear out of your mouth is what? What in the world is wrong with me? The second thing I want to hear from you is, how are you going to fix it? How are you going to make me feel better? And then if and only if I'm interested, then I may want to hear why this is the right facility, why you're the right doctor. But again, if you focus on the what and the how, I think you're going to win friends and influence people.
No, I agree. Yeah, I mean, if you look at decisions, and has been writing about this, is that the decision really breaks into two parts. Almost every decision. One is, a binary decision. The first decision is a binary decision. Are we going to do this or not? Are we going to change or not? And then the second decision, I call it the choice, is, okay, having decided to do it, who are we going to do it with? And to your point is, if you do a great job of helping the buyer understand the how and the what, you become the obvious choice for the why.
I would think so.
Yeah.
Because again, my experience is most of the decks I see, we just spend way too much time talking about the why.
Yeah, and that's because people don't understand this decision, how decisions get made. Yeah. And so and this was, I think, a professor at Ohio State University, I forget his name, Paul Nutt, I think, maybe, who wrote about this is and read about it in several books, and it makes a lot of sense. And actually he, has expanded that beyond just, business decision making, but also in personal decision making is, it's always sort of this two-step thing. A, are we going to do it or not? And B, if we're going to do it, who are we going to do it with?
Yep.
And everybody sells to the who we are going to do it with, and they sort of miss the whole opportunity on the what and the how.
Yeah.
And that's, they sell past what they should be selling. So now, have you seen anything different in the trends in terms of presentation? Because I'm always interested in this, is you would think by now people have gotten away from the heavy bullet-laden slides. I mean, what are you seeing recently? I haven't seen that many new things myself, but I'd be interested to see what you're seeing out there.
I'm seeing some of the same old stuff. I met with a client yesterday that wanted help with a pitch that they had to make to some investors. And, my comment was, and I tried to make it with respect, but I looked at his deck and I said, now, you realize this is called PowerPoint and not Power Paragraph. and he kind of looked at me because—
You've always got the bon mot.
Well, it was like, look, if you want to email this to somebody and have them read it, I think it's spectacular. Or if you want to leave it as a leave behind, a handout, I think it's spectacular. But if this is a deck you're going to present, you're using complete sentences and you've got full paragraphs. Why would you do that? And that's one thing, again, and maybe it's just the way I think about it. If you can send me your deck and I can read it, then just send me your damn deck. I really don't need you. And so why in the world would you do that? I mean, and it's not like I'm some sort of genius, but when people want copies of my training deck, it's like, I'm more than happy to send it to you because you know what? you're not going to be able to figure out what the story is. The presentation, the PowerPoint, is a visual aid, and so it's helping support my story. I could send you, Andy, my entire deck on better prospecting skills, and I could give you a week, and you might be able to figure out about a third of it. But 2/3 of it, you're going to be like, why in the world is there a picture of a sunset on this slide? Mm-hmm. I'm not really sure. I get why this is in part. And I think that's what we want to be. We want it to be supporting. We want it to be a visual aid. We want it to be provocative. And we want it to be unusual. We as we're presenting it, we want people to go, where in the world is he going with this? Because that's how you keep people engaged. That's how you keep people interested. If you're just same old, I think it's tough sledding. It is tough sledding, period, in a conversation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's you'd think after all this time with the technology that we've had with PowerPoint. I mean, PowerPoint's been out, what, at least 20 years, right?
Oh,
is the rules, the best practices are pretty clear. And so if you're looking at putting together a presentation, you have to start by asking yourself, is this something that'd be of interest to me? I mean, if you're an audience member, look at your own presentation and say, would I sit through this?
Yeah.
And chances are you wouldn't. And so if that's the case, if you're really being pragmatic about it and you're trying to be most effective and efficient with your time, start with that. It's the equivalent of looking in a mirror.
Yeah.
Look the presentation in the mirror. If it's just words, there's no pictures, there's no story. If you haven't identified what the storyline is or the through line throughout the slides that you're going to talk about, customer's not going to get it either. And if you're up there just talking to sort of a random, disparate collection of slides, you're not going to get the result you want out of the meeting.
Well, you won't get the result you want out of that meeting. And then even far worse, in my opinion, is you're not going to get invited back.
Well, that's what I meant. The result you want, the next step, there's not going to be a next step.
Yeah.
I mean, you can just kill things so easily with presentations, and it doesn't require a ton of work. Think about it. It's less work to put fewer bullet points on a slide. Excuse me. I'm going to look at my slides. Mine are very graphic oriented, and I'll have usually a single bullet. Just a description of what the page looks like, or not the page, but the image on the page or something that's related to it. So it's one thought per page. You try to think about that one. At least for me, I think it's optimal if you just have just one thought per page.
Yeah.
And especially these days when you look at the way the movies are edited, how they've changed, and TV shows the same way. As it used to be, camera would hold the camera on a character longer, but now, I guess due to people's perception that we can't maintain people's interest if we have long camera shots, the editing is really quick back and forth. I had read somewhere it's like, sort of 3 seconds on average.
Wow.
Going back and forth. And so you think about it when you're presenting a slide presentation, if you've got an audience that's accustomed to consuming information and entertainment with quicker cuts, it's not in your best interest to have a slide that takes, 10 minutes to present. You're going to lose people.
No. Well, and again, maybe it just gets back to we're not doing a very good job helping our reps understand how to put together a better presentation. I mean, here's a magical question. If you're listening to this, to ask yourself is, when you put together a presentation, what methodology, what process, what roadmap are you using? And if you don't have one, then you're leaving it to chance. And hey, just get on Amazon and Google sales presentations. God help you. There's got to be a dozen books out there. But if you don't know kind of if you have no clue how to bake chocolate chip cookies, just throwing a bunch of stuff in the bowl, mixing it and throwing it in the oven ain't going to get you there, right? You're going to have a recipe. So go get yourself a recipe and start someplace and refine it from there. But quit just flailing around in the wind, because that's not going to serve you well.
No, gosh, and this gets back to sort of a bigger topic, which you and I have talked about in the past, is that, like everything in sales, it all requires thought, deliberate action. Being out there, being hammered on metrics by managers, and being, sort of robotic in terms of number of calls and connects and dials you have to make. That's not getting you where you want to go. Every action you take needs to be the result of deliberate thought. And that's true with your presentations.
Yeah. I mean, we ought to be selling on purpose. There's a science behind it.
You think?
Well, told somebody after 3 decades of being around top performers, certain patterns of success begin to emerge.
Right.
You know, I've done this for a while, and it's not like I got it figured out. But you start seeing what works, and you want to grab onto that and copy and paste it to the best of your abilities.
Excellent. Tim, as always, pleasure to talk to you. So how can people connect with you?
You can always check out the website, timwackel.com, TIMWACKEL.com, or pick up the phone.
Do you need help spelling your name?
Yeah, sometimes.
That pause.
Or go old school. Pick up the phone. One of the biggest chuckles I get, Andy, is when people call and I answer the phone.
Yeah,
and they're like, "Why are you answering the phone?" It's like, well, because the sooner you quit shopping, the faster I get an order. So pick up the phone, give me a call, 214-369-7722. If I'm not here, leave a message, and if I don't get back to you in 2 hours, something has gone terribly wrong in my life. So visit the website, pick up the phone, give me a call. We'll chat.
Well, unless they call you right as you're ready to tee off.
Oh, I'll still make time to call you back.
Okay, perfect. I thought they don't forbid cell phones on your golf course.
No, they do. we got to pay those bills somehow.
Yeah, I was going to say. All right. Well, Tim, great to talk to you as always. And friends, thank you for joining me again today. Remember, come back, join me again tomorrow. We have another excellent guest. Until then, I would really appreciate if you take a second. Maybe after this show is over, you got an application on your phone, podcast app. With that, you can subscribe to this podcast. You can leave a review to this podcast. We'd really appreciate hearing from you. So thanks again for joining me. Until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.